It should come to no surprise that because of Mark Pope's new offensive system that he's bringing to Kentucky, the Wildcats actually brought in the best shooter in the entire nation through the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing why Kentucky basketball has the best shooter in all of college basketball this upcoming season. That is Koby Brea. Also on today's episode, the Wildcats not quite out of the race yet with five-star guard Braylon Mullins. That's right, he's no longer a four-star, but a five-star prospect. What do we know about the latest surrounding his recruitment? Going to dive into that on today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball has the best shooter in the entire country. Now, the Wildcats obviously bringing in new head coach Mark Pope with a new offensive system that's going to prioritize three-point shooting and efficiency. And what better way to kick things off here in season one with Pope than by bringing in a number of high-profile shooters through the transfer portal, and not just the best shooter in the country, but also the second best shooter, in my opinion, in Kerr Kriisa and Koby Brea. I want to focus here on Koby Brea. We're going to start to kind of preview these different additions that the Wildcats have brought in this offseason as we get closer and closer to Big Blue Madness, and then obviously the exhibition game starting October 23rd. But I want to start here with the player that excites me, I think, the most out of all of these different guys, and that is Koby Brea, the transfer from Dayton. We've talked a lot about Brea and whether or not he is going to have a larger role than his sixth-man role at Dayton with the Cats. Will he fit with this team with more minutes? Will they give him more shots? The efficiency was just absolutely incredible a season ago, and we'll get to that in just a second. But the question with Brea has been the overarching, okay, he's a really, really good player offensively. Do you feed him more, and does the volume hurt or help the team? If you look at seasons past for Koby Brea, outside of this season, this past year at Dayton with the Flyers, he's had statistically above average years, at least from beyond the arc. Inside the arc and field goal percentage overall has been a little bit of a different story. Now, the volume hasn't changed that much throughout his 4-year collegiate career. It's actually kind of stayed the same through his sophomore and senior seasons. The only year that he didn't really take a ton of shots was his freshman season at Dayton, where he only took 2.4 field goal attempts per game. But Brea, from a statistic standpoint, whether you give him volume, whether you don't, has always been, and I think will be, Kentucky's best three-point shooter, and a very, very, very good three-point shooter at that. I think it's clear once you look at the numbers, he is the best that college basketball has to offer this season. We did this deep dive whenever he committed to the Cats, and I'm going to go over just the basic numbers here, and then we'll dive into some more specific stuff. Last season at Dayton, he shot 49.8%, not from the field, but from beyond the arc. Nearly 50% from three, averaging 11.1 points per game, while also averaging 3.8 rebounds, 1.2 assists, and half a steal per contest. He was taking 7.5 shots per game. 6.1 of those were three-pointers. I wonder if he does end up starting for the Cats over Otega Dawe at shooting guard, or if he comes off the bench behind a guy like Jackson Robinson at small forward. It's going to be really interesting to see how Kentucky deals with Dawe, Robinson, and Brea. But regardless, I think that the question you have to ask is whether or not Brea is coming off the bench. Okay, cool. Do you get him more three-point shots? Because even if he dips 10% If he goes down to 39%, which would be 4% below his career average, he's still a really, really good shooter and still one of the best in the country. 11 points while shooting 50% from beyond the arc. You would expect that with a guy like Reed Sheppard, who we've talked about before a lot on the show, just both in college and then projecting out to the NBA, man, if you give him more shots, even if the efficiency dips, he's still an incredible scoring option. He's a Steph Curry-like player, at least in the NBA, I think, and you're starting to see that based on what we're hearing out of Rockets camp. But back to Brea here. 49.8% from three. That's really, really good. And you may say, okay, well, Lance, we've listened to the show before. We've heard you break down different transfer portal players and how they really struggle from one side of the arc, but they make up with everything and kind of finish with an average or above average three-point shooting percentage because they shoot really, really well from one side of the wing, or they shoot really, really well from a corner, and that's how they were utilized in their previous offense. Allow me, if you have not heard this before, allow me to walk through briefly how Koby Brea shot from both the left and right wing and the left and right corners a season ago. Last year, Koby Brea, 30% of his field goal attempts came from the right wing three. Shot 45%. 45% on right wing threes. That's really, really good. Right corner threes, 11% of his field goal attempts. 44% from beyond the arc there. And then from the left, it gets even better. Left wing, he shot 54%. 54%. 21% of his field goal attempts. At least, I think, three-point attempts, I should say. I know the math doesn't math here, but this is what Synergy said, so I'm going with it. And then left corner threes. 19% of his field goals, according to Synergy. This is not my numbers, this is theirs. 56% on left corner threes. So 45 and 44 from the left wing or from the right wing and corner. 54 and 56 from the left wing and corner. You're not going to find a better guard in college basketball that has the body that Koby Brea does that shoots that well. 6'6", by the way. 180 pounds. 6'6" guard wing type player. Just an excellent, excellent pickup over teams like UConn this offseason. He shot 65% at the rim as a guard. As a guard, he shot 65% at the rim. You would be hard-pressed to find a lot of forwards, a lot of active offensive forwards that shoot that well at the rim. Now, granted, he didn't shoot a ton at the rim, and if you look at seasons past, he kind of struggled there, actually. In his freshman year, he only shot 40% from the floor, 43.6%. The following season, he took a big dip to 36.3% from the floor in his junior season, and then he caught fire last year and ended up shooting over 51% from the floor, period. 83% effective field goal percentage in catch and shoot situations. That's a very underrated stat when it comes to talking about what Kentucky wants to do on offense. Catch and shoot effective field goal percentage. How effective can the Cats be when they're running in transition and they have all of these options, filling lanes and stepping out to the three-point line? 83%, by the way, was the best in the nation a season ago. Great upper body control when taking and making shots. This is an incredible, incredible addition with his size, with his ability to knock down shots from everywhere. You can also get some rebounding, some passing in there. I think that the ball handling is something that's actually a little underrated about Koby Brea. If you go back and watch a lot of his highlights, it's not just catch and shoot stuff. It's not just spot up stuff. The kid can dribble. The kid can handle the ball and create a little space, and he's not afraid to take deep shots off of those isolation situations. I love this pickup. I've been excited about this since day one, and I've continued to say, hey, look, if you give him the shots, this team can lead your team in scoring this kid can lead your team in scoring in a hurry. The reason that we're talking about this today with Koby Brea is that Andy Katz of March Madness actually just recently ranked the best shooters in the nation, and he actually has Koby Brea as number one. I don't tend to disagree. I think he is objectively, from a number standpoint, and from his form, from the highlights, he is the best shooter in college basketball that is returning. You've also got guys like Mark Sears on here, LJ Cryer, Janelle Davis, RJ Davis, Trevin Nell, Caleb Love, who I don't think deserves to be on this list at all, just in terms of efficiency. You've got some really, really solid play here at shooting guard and small forward returning to college basketball. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Does Koby Brea deserve to be here as the best shooter in all of college basketball? I certainly think he does. All right, I want to talk here for a little bit about Kentucky and their recruiting with Braylon Mullins. Kentucky not out of the race just yet, according to Kentucky Sports Radio. Let's talk about their intel here in just a little bit. Before I do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Roy. Have you heard about Roy? Well, it stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. You can support players directly. You can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. And as you all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes, and Roy changes the NIL game for fans. You can directly support players. Roy allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes. So if you want to go and get a Deion Walker, if you want to go to get a Brock Vandegrift, a Berrien Brown, you can absolutely support them individually. With Roy, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. Really, really awesome stuff. You can download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll be automatically entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Again, visit roy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. It's void where prohibited. You can get the Roy app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. You can use referral code Locked On for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. Again, visit FanDuel or visit roy.com for more details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. You can get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy. All right, continuing along here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. So let's break this down here really quickly. Braylon Mullins, a 5-star shooting guard, has been a prospect that the Wildcats have been going after heavily for quite some time now. Indiana involved in this recruitment, Michigan as well, Duke, Tennessee, UConn has been a really big player as of late. And Kentucky Sports Radio, Jack Pilgrim, a couple hours ago, brought this to the website. Apparently, Kentucky is not out of the race with Mullins just yet. In fact, Mullins has kept Kentucky's official visit ahead of his fall decision. He had trips to Duke and then to Tennessee on October 4th through 6th and October 18th through 20th. And then he had a visit to Kentucky October 25th through 27th. He has canceled both of his visits with the Blue Devils and the Vols. He's winding down his recruitment, and he's taking an official visit to Indiana this weekend, September 20th through 22nd. He will transition into this decision mode ahead of the early signing period in November, according to Jack Pilgrim. Braylon Mullins, now rated as a 5-star prospect, according to 24/7 Sports. On3's industry ranking still has him as a 4-star, but if you go over 24/7 Sports and their composite ratings, both their individual and their composite ratings have him rated as a 5-star guard. This is, in case you don't know, 6 foot, 180-pound shooting guard out of Central Greenfield, Indiana. He is, I think, the best shooter in this year's class. Hey, look at that. We're talking about a lot of different shooters here in college basketball in today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You've got Koby Brea, who I think is just incredible, just an incredible addition for the Cats this year. And then you've also got Braylon Mullins here, who I think could be elite for Kentucky next season. Mullins, I think, is one of those guys where you look at him and you say you immediately look and say, okay, it's shot creation, it's shooting, it's aggressive. It's an aggressive barrage of shots from beyond the arc. That's what he brings to the table. Now, you do have to ask, what does that ball handling look like? What does the defense look like? What does the rebounding, every other major aspect that you would want him to have at 6'4", 180, 190 pounds? Can you add different things onto his game? And as he has continued to play through these circuits, and if I'm not mistaken, he's actually going to play in a circuit in Las Vegas here. Actually, he's going to play in a top 150 camp for a few days out in Vegas. He has canceled all remaining visits except for one to Kentucky beyond that point. So can he kind of continue to show through these different camps and things that he is prepared to kind of take that next step and get ready for the college game by adding other aspects to his arsenal, right? I think that if you pair him with somebody like a Jasper Johnson and a Caden Lewis, I think you really start to see how things could offensively go boom for the Cats next season. There's not really any other analysis that I have. It's a really, really good shooter. He can score in bunches. You get him with somebody like Johnson or Lewis next year, boom. Like things are just going to go insane for Mark Pope and his backcourt next year. And KSR kind of hints at this, and I kind of want to continue to break this down, kind of see where this is going with his recruitment. Could playing with Johnson be an issue for Braylon Mullins? We'll dive into that in just a second. Before we do that and wrap up the show, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here. It's America's #1 sports book, and we have something a little different for you here because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that is FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, wrapping up the Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. So we're breaking down 5-star shooting guard here. According to 24/7 Sports, Brillan Mullins is the number 16 overall player, number 3 shooting guard, number 2 player in the state of Indiana in the 2025 class. Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Tennessee, UConn, Duke, all players in this race. Unfortunately for Duke and Tennessee, his official visits with those two programs have been canceled, but he's keeping his official visit with the Cats later on this year. He's going to make a decision probably in November. It's going to be shortly after his trip to Lexington. The Cats are still in the race. And this is what Jack Pilgrim has to say about kind of how things sit right now. Why is the trip planned to Lexington significant? It comes after some shakiness in his recruitment, specifically following 5-star guard Jasper Johnson's commitment to Kentucky. Mullins' father, Josh, previously told David Sisk of Cats Illustrated there were potential fit concerns and playing style overlaps that would have to be considered when moving forward with the Cats, if at all. 2 dynamic shot makers. Are there room for both together? It's going to be hard. We want to see if him and Braylon can play together. It's what Mullins said last week. I just don't know where everybody stands. Can Jasper and Braylon play together? I don't know. Pilgrim continues. Those concerns align with growing buzz surrounding UConn, the back-to-back champs, emerging as a top contender to land Mullins' commitment. Meanwhile, the Indiana Hoosiers are desperate to keep the Greenfield native home, with Michigan and North Carolina also pushing. It appeared Johnson's commitment would send the 4-star guard elsewhere in a one or the other scenario. Now, Mark Pope has circled back with Mullins' camp about their potential fit together in the backcourt, with the Kentucky staff in the process of scheduling a trip to see the standout shooter at Greenfield Central High School this week, sources tell KSR. They're trying to all figure it out, one source said. I think it's still there. Both Jasper and Malachi Marino, have said a lot of really solid things about Mullins just as a player and then as a person. I think that it would make sense for these guys from a relationship standpoint to get along well, but there are the questions about whether or not guys like Mullins and guys like Jasper can coexist on the court at the same time. Now, this, I think, is doable for a couple of reasons. Number one, Jasper, I've continued to say over and over and over, he's not a combo guard. I'd play him exclusively at the 2. There's a world where next year, if you get Mullins and Johnson, Jasper's your point guard, and Mullins is your 2. You just have you just rock a really young backcourt. Where does a Caden Lewis play into that? Lewis probably, by the way, he's currently a 4-star. There's a good chance he pushes for 5-star status by the time all is said and done here. But where does he fall into that? Do you end up getting him? If you have Johnson and Mullins, and it's clear Johnson would run point and Mullins would play the 2, I don't think Mullins is tall enough or physical enough to play small forward unless you want to play Lewis, Johnson, and Mullins, in which case that's a lot of offense and probably not enough defense. At least that would be my initial reaction to that. I don't know. I think that there are different ways you could mix and match this to make this work. But at the end of the day, you're going to sacrifice something, whether that be a returning player that's currently a freshman. And I'm not hinting at anything. We're just talking out how the roster could shake out, just walking through it. It's either a freshman that you end up losing out on, a freshman currently that ends up transferring during their sophomore year. That could have been good. It could be a transfer portal piece that you really want to round out the roster that you can't quite get because you can't promise enough playing time or enough NIL. There are different ways this could shake out. At the end of the day, the fact that the Wildcats are still in the running, the fact that they are still actually pursuing this kid, and there's a really good chance that they are one of the final 2 or 3 schools that he's considering, I think that's great. If you're able to make impressions and convince him that the Cats are the best option during his official visit later on this year, let's rock with it. I would take Jasper. I would take Mullins. We'll see what we can do with Lewis. We're just going to have to work on it at that point. What else do you do with your recruiting class if you do get Mullins in November? I'm not really sure. Kentucky may be content. Who knows? So that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.